Over the years, tablets have become a lot more affordable. For around 25,000 pesos, you can already own an Android tablet with more than decent specs and features, or even a basic iPad. Well, at least by the time we recorded this video, the iPad is around 25,000 pesos, at least the base model one. If you want to know more about those, you can always check out our numerous listicles on the YugaTech website or on this channel. But here's the thing. Most, if not all of those run Android, well, aside from the iPad, of course. But imagine owning a Windows tablet for around the same price, if not cheaper. Well, now there is. Meet the CHUWI Hi10 Max. The brand is relatively new in the market, but this thing is also a very affordable Windows tablet. Of course, you might have your doubts about the quality and performance, and trust me, I did too at first. It does come with a bunch of free accessories like a keyboard and a stylus, and a stand, which it's weird because this is the stand. I mean, it's still nice though. But just how did this tablet surprise me? Well, I'm Jose from YugaTech, and let's find out in this review of the CHUWI Hi10 Max. In terms of design, at first glance, you wouldn't think that the CHUWI Hi10 Max is a Windows tablet, especially if you remove the case. It looks just like any other Android tablet on the market. Well, there's Intel inside, which should give you an idea of what it has. But aside from that, you have the camera on the upper left corner of the screen, and that's pretty much about it. Because of that simplistic design, it doesn't look cheap. In fact, if you remove some of these stickers, you'll look like a very premium tablet. But the one giveaway is that it is made out of plastic instead of metal, as with most tablets on the market. And it doesn't feel like it's very thick plastic either, since you can hear it. Still, there is some metal bits, which is the frame, and as a result, it does feel a bit heavy. The tablet alone, without the keyboard, already weighs 780 grams. Not to mention, it's quite big too, and it's a bit thick at 9mm thick. Personally, I don't mind the thickness though. You get several I/O ports in exchange for the added girth. You get a single USB-A 3.0 port on the right side, along with a 3.5mm audio port. And on the left, you have two USB-C ports and a mini HDMI port. I do wish CHUWI moved one of them to the right to make it a bit more flexible, but that's pretty much it. Aside from that, you have the volume rockers at the top and the power button as well. Initially, we had a hard time using the stand included, since it wouldn't really stand properly with the bottom portion constantly coming off. Or, it just wouldn't stand. But after checking the CHUWI website, we realized that the upper part, this one, of the camera island is the one that needed to fold, not the bottom. It's not the most ergonomic way of doing things, but hey, at least now it works somehow. The unit we have, the CHUWI Hi10 Max, comes with a stylus and a keyboard too. There's nothing to write home about the keyboard. In fact, it's not the most accurate when you tried a typing test using it. Interestingly, it's not connected via Bluetooth either. It needs a physical connection, just like so. And that's the only time it starts working. Otherwise, you just have to use the touchscreen keyboard. Now, unfortunately, because of that, you can't really type when you're far from the tablet. Now, moving on to the trackpad. The trackpad itself is decent and helps when you're lazy to use the touchscreen. But I did find it having some issues, especially when I'm scrolling too fast, and particularly when you're trying to go for the right click. Sometimes it just doesn't click. As for the stylus itself, it's decent at best. Unfortunately, for those of you who love to draw or to sketch, you might have a hard time using it. It does have pressure sensitivity, but it's not the most accurate, as you can see from this test we did. It has an especially difficult time when you're trying to be light on your drawing, and you can see the stylus skipping on lines. But when you're fully pressed down on the screen, it does work really well. So sketching, not the best. While there is a magnet on the stylus, weirdly it sticks to the bottom of the tablet itself. It does not stick to the edges here, nor here. See? Overall though, the build quality of the CHUWI Hi10 Max tablet itself is great, but I can't say the same for its supporting accessories. There is no mention of IP rating though, so it's best to protect it from the elements when you're using it. So, the CHUWI Hi10 Max has a great build, but what really surprised me about it is the decent display. On paper, it's a 12.96-inch display with an IPS LCD panel. Pretty basic. However, it looks great and the colors are nice, and it's likely due to its 3K resolution. The borders aren't the thinnest, but they're relatively thin on the sides, which do give you a nice viewing pleasure. Despite having only 60Hz refresh rate, the animation is quite smooth too. I tried editing some photos on the tablet and the colors are relatively accurate. The blacks aren't as deep as my usual setup, but that's to be expected. I also enjoyed watching movies and videos on the tablet when I brought it around instead of bringing my laptop. The only downside of the screen is that it only has 300 nits of peak brightness, which makes it hard to use outdoors, especially when it's very sunny like lately. Some might say that the 60Hz is also a downside, especially for gamers. However, you really won't be playing games on this tablet if I'm being honest, and I'll explain more about it later on. Another weak point of the Hi10 Max is the speakers. It comes with dual stereo speakers, but they aren't loud. And the quality isn't great either. I tried watching some videos and I had a hard time hearing everything happening on screen. Even when listening to music, it sounds a bit muddy and it lacks a lot of clarity. Thankfully, there is a 3.5mm audio port which you will end up using if you want to watch movies, animes, or any series on this tablet. Alternatively, you can also pair your favorite Bluetooth earphones, or better yet, pair it to a speaker so everyone can hear. It's not perfect, but for the price, the display is great. I wish CHUWI did better with the speakers though, since a phone speaker sounds a lot louder and better than what this thing currently has on right now. As mentioned before, you do get cameras on the CHUWI Hi10 Max. You get an 8-megapixel rear camera to take photos and a 5-megapixel camera on the front for selfies or to use during meetings. Honestly, there's nothing to write home about the camera on the Hi10 Max. It's a relatively cheap tablet after all. You're better off taking photos using your phone camera and you'll get results that are around at least 10 to 20 times better than the ones on this tablet. It is decent for taking documents though, I'll give it that. For the front camera, it's more than adequate enough for taking video calls, especially for meetings. The quality does drop a lot when there's not a lot of light, but it's more than adequate if you're just, for meetings, as I mentioned. Definitely not for streaming though. Considering the quality, it's not worth the time and effort to use a heavy tablet, especially a Windows one at that, for capturing content. But hey, you do you. I mean, you know our take on taking photos with the tablet. But if you're really curious, just check out our gallery here to see what kind of photos this tablet can take. What makes this tablet great is the fact that it runs on Windows 11 Home. There's also no bloatware like antivirus software and the like, so you have a clean state to start with. And since this is a Windows OS, you can effectively install any Windows app you want. Well, assuming the processor can handle it, which we'll talk more about in the next segment. There's not much to say about the OS since it's very much a standard Windows operating system, Windows 11. It's smooth too, even though the chipset isn't the most powerful. But since there are no other apps installed, you will have to do everything by yourself. Photoshop, Lightroom, Illustrator, you name it, it will have to come from you. The only app where you can actually fully utilize the stylus is the Paint app. Still, for the price, you shouldn't really be expecting any more. In the performance department, that's where the CHUWI Hi10 Max lacks a lot. Under the hood, it runs a 12th gen Intel N100 chipset with 3.4 GHz clock speeds. For those of you unfamiliar, the N100 chipset from Intel does not have any performance cores. It's all efficiency cores. Effectively, it's made for working and productivity. There is no dedicated GPU on this thing though, not even an Intel Arc unit. But it does have 12 GB of RAM and fast SSD storage of up to 512 GB. Now, if you need more space, you can always just plug in your hard disk into the USB-C or the USB-A port. But 512 GB is more than adequate for what this is capable of. For usual everyday tasks like writing emails, doing documents, and even watching videos or streams, it's more than adequate for the processor. It can even run Photoshop, Lightroom, and Illustrator smoothly, which is a great bonus. But if you want to play games, personally, don't even bother. Out of curiosity, I ended up installing Genshin Impact to see just how it would perform. I mean, it does load up the game and run, but that's about it. Even on the lowest settings, you have very bad lag and there is frame rate drops just from opening the menu of the game. The only workaround I found out to get the game to run smoothly was to play it in windowed mode on 1920 by 1080 resolution. But even then, it's not the smoothest. The moment you run into enemies or cast multiple skills, it will suffer frame rate drops. But then again, considering this is an N100 chipset, you shouldn't really be expecting gaming performance. For productivity though, it gets the job done. If you're interested, we've also run our usual benchmarks and you can check out our scores here. They're not the best, but they are decent numbers. The battery life of the CHUWI Hi10 Max isn't the strongest out there either. It runs a 36.48 watt-hour battery pack, or in phone terms, that's around 4,800 milliamp hours according to CHUWI. Based on my usage, it was able to last 3.5 hours continuously before I needed to find the charger. For reference, I use this mainly to transfer files from my camera, write up some reviews including this one, and more. I also didn't turn on battery saver mode and set the power mode to just balance. It should last a lot longer if you switch things up to best power efficiency mode and turn on battery saver mode early, but as we always say, battery life is always dependent on the end user. But if you're going to be watching movies, drawing stuff on Photoshop, then it will definitely drain faster considering the battery is lighting up a 3K display. When you do need to recharge, it is very easy to do so. You can use the provided charger, which is a USB-C cable to a 12-volt DC charger. But you can also use other USB-C cables and power bricks laying around as long as you have a high wattage output. Overall, I must say that the CHUWI Hi10 Max is a pretty decent tablet. For the price of 25,990 pesos, you get a Windows tablet which comes with the keyboard and the stylus and even the stand itself. Since it runs on Windows, you can also think of it like a laptop as well. But herein lies the problem of the CHUWI. As a tablet, it's not the best since there are others out there better for drawing and has more power. The upside is that it has a beautiful 3K display and it runs on Windows. Isn't that great? But if you think of it as a laptop, it isn't that great either. The keyboard and trackpad aren't smooth, and the battery life could be better. It also can't run games properly, so it's mainly something for productivity purposes. You can do some creative productivity, but I would recommend using a proper laptop or computer to do so. Heck, maybe an iPad Air would be better for, Photoshop or Lightroom. Nonetheless though, the CHUWI Hi10 Max is a decent product for something that you would consider is a 2-in-1 laptop Windows/tablet. But it doesn't really excel in either one of those aspects. Still, if you want to try something like this, like a 2-in-1 Windows tablet/laptop, why not try it out? It's not that expensive anyway. At the end of the day, if you're not gonna end up using it, you can use it as a work laptop or tablet. But what do you think of the CHUWI Hi10 Max so far? Is it something you'd consider if you can't decide between a laptop or a tablet? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Also, if you found this video informative or interesting, do drop a like and subscribe to watch more. Also, don't forget to follow us on our social media platforms, Facebook, IG, X, and of course TikTok. And visit YugaTech.com to stay updated with the latest tech news and reviews. Once again, this has been Jose, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. See ya!